Hey there, folks! Today, we're diving into the story of an unsinkable sea fortress, Fort Drum, the concrete battleship. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's roll it back to 1895. Cuba, just south of the US, had launched its fight for independence from Spain. To crush the rebellion, Spain sent in troops. In the US, they deployed the USS Maine to Havana Harbor, supposedly to protect American citizens. Then came the spark. On February 5th, 1898, the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 266 US sailors. To this day, the cause remains a mystery. But back then, the US blamed Spain. And just like that, war was on. That was just the start of the Spanish-American War. It was the beginning of American imperial power. Within 6 months of declaring war, the US had taken nearly all of Spain's overseas territories. On December 10th, 1898, the two nations signed the Treaty of Paris, ending the war and signaling America's rise as a global power. To secure this vital Pacific outpost, the US began building something unique, Fort Drum. It was a man-made island, built from scratch, to guard the entrance to Manila Bay. The entrance to Manila Bay had several small islands, including the larger Corregidor Island. Seeing the strategic value, the US made a bold move. Fortify 4 key islands, Corregidor, Caballo, Carabao, and El Fraile. The idea? Set up a defensive line to stop enemy ships before they could enter the bay. And if an invasion came, those forts would buy enough time for reinforcements from the US mainland to arrive. Construction began in April 1909, led by the US Army Corps of Engineers, and took about 5 years to finish. But El Fraile Island was a challenge. It was just a big rock sticking out of the sea. So engineers cut it down to sea level, then built something wild on top. A massive concrete structure, reinforced with steel shaped like a full-on battleship. The result? A fortress that looked like a warship and could take a pounding like one, too. They called it the Unsinkable Battleship. Fort Drum wasn't a real battleship, but its specs? No joke. It measured 110 meters long, 44 wide, and stood 12 meters above the water at low tide. This concrete beast wasn't just for show. Inside, it held barracks, support facilities, and, of course, a serious lineup of weapons. Its walls? Between 10 and 13 meters thick. The roof? Nearly 7 meters, built to shrug off naval gunfire. And in weaker spots, they added steel armor, 76 to 101 millimeters thick. Yeah, this thing was built like a tank. But here's the twist. When it was first built, Fort Drum had no anti-aircraft guns, because back then, no one really saw aircraft as a threat. Now, let's talk firepower. Its main guns? 2 twin-gun turrets, each packing 14-inch M1909 naval cannons. These weren't leftovers from ships, they were made specifically for Fort Drum. Each gun weighed over 1,000 tons and could elevate up to 15 degrees. Both turrets rotate in 60 degrees. The front one was limited to 230 since the second turret blocked part of its arc. These monster guns could fire 548-kilogram shells at over 720 meters per second, reaching out to 20.7 kilometers. But in real combat, the effective range was closer to 17.5. Now, compared to the 14-inch guns on Navy battleships, Fort Drum's shells were lighter. But here's the trade-off. They fired faster, 2 rounds per minute versus the battleship's 1.5. And the turrets? Not just powerful, tough. They had 406 millimeters of armor on the front, 114 to 152 on top, and up to 406 on the cylindrical barbette below. Still, even this beast had a weak spot. Each turret had 3 periscopes for observation, sticking out about 20 centimeters from the armor. And guess what? They were barely protected, less than 2 centimeters thick. That made them easy targets, if the enemy knew where to look. Now, aside from its main guns, Fort Drum also carried 4 6-inch M1908 coastal guns, operated by the US Army. Each could elevate to 12 degrees and fire 40-kilogram shells just over 10 kilometers. Fort Drum had a 20-meter spotting mast to help track shell impacts and guide fire. For night ops, 2 massive 3-meter searchlights lit up the sea, and its communication system? Pretty advanced for the time. Undersea cables linked it to other forts, allowing real-time telephone comms. But the coolest part? Inside each 6-inch gun position, soldiers used flashing lamps to send signals visible only from certain angles, so enemies couldn't intercept them. Simple, but super effective. Now picture all of that inside one fortress. About 240 personnel were stationed there, officers, gunners, engineers. They had living quarters, generators, ammo depots, all buried inside thick concrete. After 5 years of construction, by 1916, Fort Drum was fully operational and nearly flawless. But peace never lasts. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And Fort Drum? It was next. On January 2nd, 1942, Fort Drum came under heavy aerial bombardment from Japanese forces. The attack revealed a key weakness in the fort's rear. So what did the US do? They acted fast, installing 3-inch coastal guns in that very spot. And here's the wild part. Just one day later, January 3rd, before the concrete had even cured, those guns opened fire on a Japanese steamship, forcing it to retreat. That moment was World War II's first US artillery strike against an enemy. And Fort Drum? It held strong. Despite relentless Japanese attacks, the fort resisted for nearly 5 months. It finally fell when Corregidor, the largest of the island forts, was captured, and US forces across the Philippines were ordered to surrender. But get this, during all that time, not a single American inside Fort Drum was killed in action. Only 5 were wounded. That made it one of the most effective and resilient fortresses ever built. But once the Japanese took over, Fort Drum flipped from US stronghold to US problem. By 1945, as the US moved to retake Manila, Fort Drum had become one of Japan's last holdouts. So they made a brutal decision. By 1945, when the US retook Manila, the US pumped in nearly 9,500 liters of gasoline and diesel, then lit it up with white phosphorus shells. I mean, I probably don't need to tell you what happened next. Today, what's left of Fort Drum still sits in the bay. A small lighthouse stands on top, guiding ships into Manila Bay. Fort Drum may be a relic of the past, but building islands to project power, still very much alive today. Across the world, nations continue to shape the seas through artificial islands, naval bases, or long-range missile networks. Whether it's for defense, deterrence, or dominance, the ocean remains a battlefield of concrete, steel, and strategy. So here's the real question. What lessons should we take from all this? Drop your thoughts in the comments.